You know, with government environmental mandates, electric cars are becoming even more popular. One could even suggest that EVs are making a bit of a comeback as electric vehicles were popular in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. In fact, Ferdinand Porsche designed the first electric drivetrain back in 1898. To talk about electric vehicles in Alberta, we're joined now by William York, Director of the Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta. William, welcome to Bridge City News.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, over 100 years ago, it was European and American companies which experimented and built electric vehicles. Today, where are we seeing the biggest innovations when it comes to electric vehicle technology? Where do you think that is?
I would say leader of the pack is Tesla, and they're an American-based company. But South Korea is also pretty advanced as well.
Is a lot of the environmental controls the governments are bringing forth, they want to cut back on emissions and pollution? Is that why we're seeing such a huge increase in the manufacturing of EVs?
I think it's a multi-pronged effect. Governments are certainly pushing for it, but Tesla and companies that are leaders in the innovation space in electric vehicles, they've made it compelling for consumers. So the performance advantages of electric vehicles is also what's driving it.
I like the pun on that. What's driving it? Now, you own an EV yourself, right?
Correct. Yeah, I became a EV owner in June of 2018. I acquired a Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive long-range unit, and I have about 85,000 pure electric kilometers driven on that thing since then. I've driven it all the way to Seattle. I've driven it to Lethbridge in -40 from where I live in Edmonton, Alberta. I drive it everywhere I possibly can. It's my family's favorite vehicle to drive. We have two vehicles. We prefer the electric vehicle over the gas-powered vehicle every day.
You know what? I'm glad you brought up about the -40-degree temperatures. Some people have concerns about the actual range with EVs, especially when you have to have your heater on for most of the time. So how much does that actually cut the range down? Does it go maybe from down to 700, down to 350? What have you experienced?
Yeah, so let me break it down for folks. When you drive an internal combustion engine vehicle, heat is a natural byproduct of the combustion cycle process. The combustion is only about 30% efficient, so the rest is waste heat. Now, in the wintertime, that's great because you need that heat, but in the summertime, that's just energy wasted. In an EV, it's different. All the energy required for the vehicle comes from the battery, and that's a very efficient process. But unfortunately, there's not much waste heat to take advantage of in the wintertime. So your battery does need to provide that heat. What we see in the worst of the worst in Alberta is a 40 to 50% range loss. So if you're driving a conventional EV with a 400 to 500 kilometer range, you're getting, in between 200 and 250 kilometers of range per charge. Now, thankfully, we don't get too many weeks of that extreme cold in Alberta. But I have driven my EV then, and the only issue that I saw was accelerated range loss. But other than that, they're fantastic winter vehicles. The heat comes out of them just like that, just like an electric hair dryer. The heat is almost instantaneous out of one of those, and same thing in an EV. And the traction control systems are fantastic because they have very high responsiveness and precision, and that's exactly what you want in an in a traction control system in the wintertime.
It's interesting. Some of my friends that own EVs, they actually have a combustion engine SUV that they use for driving in the wintertime. And then for the other 3 seasons, they drive their EVs. So they much prefer that, they said. Now, can you describe how battery technologies maybe changed over the last 10 years?
Yeah, so every year battery energy density improves by about 5%, which means that the amount of energy that you can store in a same size battery pack improves by 5% every year. So the technology keeps improving in that way. Um, if you're a follower of material science and electrical engineering, you'll see that there's lots of innovation and research going into new battery technologies and chemistries, lots of tinkering in the lab to see, hey, can we get a battery with more energy density or more winter resilience? So those are always being explored. Um, I'm seeing that lots of EVs are getting much, much better at accepting power from a fast charging station. So, for instance, in the early days of electric vehicles in the 2012 era, the most a battery could accept was about 100, 150 kilowatts. Now we're seeing batteries that can accept up to 350 kilowatts. Now, I realize this is electrical speak. So, when you're at a fast charging station, that's the difference from staying there for about 30 minutes down to about 5 to 10 minutes. So the amount of time that you have to spend charging at a fast charger is going dramatically down.
So how does that differ if you plug your vehicle in overnight, get that long charge as opposed to fast charging?
So level two charging, or what you're referring to as long charging, is what you would typically do at your home, and that's using electricity that's basically what your stove or your electric dryer would use. It's 240 volts and about 30 amps. And like you said, that's good enough for overnight. So while you sleep, your car gets fully charged, even if it's fully depleted, which isn't often the case. When you're on the road, however, or if you don't own a garage, or you don't have access to that type of electricity, you would rely on what's called a fast charging station. Now, Lethbridge, as far as I know, has, I think, one fast charging station, but there are many in the surrounding area. In fact, southern Alberta is quite well covered with fast charging infrastructure. But you would use one of those to recharge if you were not able to have access to a level two charging station.
And does that give you a full charge?
Yes, yes, it can.
Okay. I want to chat with you a bit about some of the charging stations, as you mentioned, because I haven't seen a lot of them. I have seen a few, you're right, but how long do you think it'll actually take for the infrastructure to keep up and we can see more of these charging stations across Alberta and the country for that matter?
Well, that is kind of a misconception. So, because you can charge at home, you actually don't need as much public charging infrastructure as you do gas stations because people can't refine gasoline in their home. They have no means of refueling their vehicle at home if they drive an internal combustion engine vehicle. So, we are seeing tremendous growth in EV fast charging infrastructure, actually. Back when I was first tracking the space in 2017, there were only about three fast chargers in the Alberta region. Now there's well over 50 different locations. So the infrastructure has grown immensely. And there's a resource that folks can use called PlugShare. It's an app on your phone, or if you can use your laptop or computer to go to www.plugshare.com, and that'll show you all the charging stations available in Alberta. And there's much more than you think.
Kind of like Gas Buddy, when you get the app, it's like, oh, let's see what the gas stations are. And
Yeah, very similar. In fact, it even shows you the price, and many of these charging stations are free to use. And the reason for that is that businesses like IKEA will offer this as a value add service to their customers. So they're trying to lure customers from going to the Brick or some other furniture store to come to IKEA, get a little bit of a free charge, and buy something.
so, William, how would you convince somebody like me, old school, who loves my Mopar with the Hemi and that growl and that power? How would you convince me to get that electric vehicle that's so quiet and it freaks me out when I'm a pedestrian? All of a sudden, there's a vehicle right in front of me there. There's no real sound to it at all, and that power. So, how would you convince somebody like me to make the switch?
Sure, sure. So, the fastest production cars on Earth now are electric. You can get an EV that will smoke any gas-powered vehicle on the road, and you'll spend, if you're looking at high-end vehicles, you'll spend about $100,000 less. So that's value proposition, right? Number one. If you like going fast, there's nothing faster than an EV. Value proposition number two, whatever you spend on gasoline or diesel, take that and divide that number by 5 or 10, and that's what you'll end up spending in electricity. So if you like saving money, you can drive an EV. If you don't like spending a lot of money at the dealership on maintenance, you'll love driving an EV. There's no oil changes, there's no spark plugs, there's no alternator, there's no carburetor. All those maintenance costs are reduced. In the 4 years that I've owned my electric vehicle, all I've had to do is replace windshield wiper blades, washer fluid, and a couple cabin air filters. I haven't had to do any brake pad replacements due to regenerative braking. The maintenance savings are incredible.
But there is one big thing that you will have to replace. I've chatted with Tesla owners about this in the past, and that's the batteries after 8 to 10 years. And William, that's expensive. They were telling me they're fearful of the fact it'll cost them $10,000 to $15,000 to replace the batteries in this older EV. They say, you know what? It's not even going to be worth it. How do you respond to that?
Oh, it's too bad. You talk to uninformed Tesla owners. So, drivetrain warranties for Teslas are up to 8 years or 200,000 kilometers, whichever comes first. But that doesn't suggest that the battery needs replacement. In fact, that's not true. I know many Tesla owners with their batteries that are older than 8 years or 10 years old, and their batteries are still going strong. The reality is that the batteries are designed to outlive the body. Tesla batteries are rated for up to 500,000 miles or more. So that's unfortunate that you got bad information from those Tesla owners. They'll find that out though once their vehicle turns 8, 10 years old that their battery is still doing fine. Another thing about that too is that once their battery is no longer covered by warranty, that's a future date. And we all know that battery prices have been dropping precipitously. Back in 2012, battery pack costs were about $300 per kilowatt hour. And today they're well below $100 per kilowatt hour. And the floor is still much further away. As the supply chains ramp up, as battery manufacturers get better at manufacturing these batteries, so to say that their battery today costs $13,000 to $15,000, that may be true, but it's still covered under warranty. 8 years from now, it will no longer be. So if they do require a battery replacement, and I'm not saying that's the case, it will cost much less. And the best way to think about this is an engine on your gasoline vehicle. Those are very expensive to replace. Do they fail often? Not really. It's a very rare occurrence. It does happen, and it's unfortunate for those owners, but it's not a regular occurrence with gas vehicles, nor is it for the battery for an EV.
Yeah, I'm thinking like a gas vehicle replacement, for the motor would be between $5,000 or $6,000 for the average vehicle. If it's an 8-cylinder, sixes might be different, and 4 cylinders as well. But let's talk about the batteries themselves, William. Inside the EVs, they're heavy. Wouldn't that cause more damage to the maybe the front end components, to the suspension system, especially over time when we have a lot of potholes in our cities here in Canada?
Yeah, so it is true that the battery does weigh a bit. I was speaking earlier about the battery energy density improvements. So over time, the heaviness penalty, I guess you could say, will go away. There are advantages though to having a heavy battery. This you have this heavy thing close to the ground, and that reduces the chance of a rollover, makes your center of gravity very low, which prevents a rollover, makes the handling of the vehicle very good. It also improves the front to rear balance ratio, weight balance ratio. So EVs have actually, due to the battery and its weight, uh, excellent handling capabilities. And I know I did say earlier that they have less maintenance, but they're not immune to maintenance. So suspension components do wear out and they do require replacement. And we live in Alberta; there are potholes, so that is a significant risk.
Yeah.
But the suspension components are built for the weight of the vehicle. So the engineers at these companies they design that into the suspension.
So I've got like I said, a Chrysler 300C with a Hemi motor in it. It's just over 4,000 pounds. How would you compare, let's say, a comparable Tesla, a full-size sedan, when it comes to weight?
So my car is about 4,000 pounds.
Okay, so it is comparable. Now, the CEO of Mercedes-Benz AG says his company is planning a new vehicle that will be an 800-volt class. How would this compare to the electric vehicles we're seeing right now in North America?
Oh, good question. So the 800-volt class is what he's referring to is the DC direct current bus architecture on the high voltage battery. The more voltage the battery can accommodate, usually the faster it can charge. So it's a good thing that the industry is moving this way. There are some pros and cons to that design architecture, but by and large, this means that Mercedes is making an electric vehicle that will be capable of very fast charging speeds, which means that when you're going on a road trip, let's say from Edmonton to Lethbridge, you'll have to stop for less of a duration for your vehicle.
William, I know in North Vancouver there's already a hydrogen filling station, and the Netherlands, a former gas pipeline producer, now carries hydrogen. Do you think that maybe EVs are just a stopgap measure between gas and diesel and hydrogen or ammonia as fuel sources?
No, no. So hydrogen vehicles globally, there's only about 100,000 units sold compared to electric vehicles where over 30 million units have been sold. Electricity is far more common than hydrogen. We have electricity. I have electricity in the room I'm in right now. I have electricity at home. To get the same amount of hydrogen infrastructure would cost too much. And I don't think at the end of the day you would see the fuel cost savings that you see with going electric. So I don't see hydrogen really taking off in the passenger vehicle space. And in fact, most vehicle OEMs are not producing hydrogen vehicles, nor are they putting much money into the research and development of them. I know some are, but by and large, it's going into electric drivetrains. I don't think it's a stopgap technology. I think it's going to be the technology of the future until something better comes along, let's say nuclear. But I think EVs are here to stay, especially in the passenger vehicle market. Heavy duty and medium duty vehicles, perhaps hydrogen has more of a place because of the weight and the range requirements of those vehicles. But for passenger vehicles, for folks like you and me, it's going to be electric for sure.
William York is the director of the Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta. Thanks so much for joining us today from Edmonton.
My pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.